Hey guys, welcome to the Filming with Josh podcast. I'm your host, Joshua. That's annoying. Someone texted me right at the beginning of the intro. Well, let's try that again. Hey guys, welcome to the Filming with Josh podcast. I'm your host, Joshua Milligan, and this is episode number 112, a bunch of random video talk.
This is the Filming with Josh podcast, brought to you by Rustic River Media. Welcome to the videographer's home for tips, tricks, and how to make flicks.
Thanks, guys, for listening in to another episode of the Filming with Josh podcast. If you are new to the podcast, Filming with Josh is your home for tips, tricks, and how to make flicks. Here on the podcast, we talk about all things video, from script writing and storyboarding to how to price your work. We talk about it all on this podcast. We also have a Facebook group called Filming with Josh that I promise to get back to updating. So if you are not yet in that Facebook group, be sure to go to Facebook, type in Filming with Josh, and ask to join the group today. The Filming with Josh Facebook group is typically a continuation of this podcast when I'm actually posting on it, and it's a great place to come and learn more about video. So be sure to go to Filming with Josh on Facebook and ask to join the group today. If you are new to this podcast, just know that we are also available, if you're watching this on YouTube, on Spotify and Podbean, as well as Apple Podcasts. And if you're listening on one of those platforms, just note that we are available on YouTube as well. YouTube only goes back to episode 100, but you can backdate all 100 previous episodes through the Audible podcast if you go to one of the major podcast platforms. Anyway, now that that's out of the way, let's talk about a bunch of random stuff, because that's really all I'm going to do today is talk about a bunch of random stuff. And part of that is because, honestly, I have been so swamped that I'm looking at it right now, it is June 5th. I think my last podcast came out mid-April, like April 17th or something like that, which is crazy because I never wait that long to come out with a podcast. But I've been swamped, man. I've had so much going on that, to be honest, I just have not had time lately. And that's usually not the case. I almost always find time to make podcasts. But honestly, this year has been pretty wild, which we're going to talk about here in today's episode. So I do have a few jotted notes. It's a bunch of random stuff, but I have a few things on screen. So if you're watching this on YouTube and you see me glance at my computer, it's just because I'm doing my best. Look at this. Someone calling me. It's because I'm doing my best to stay on track. This is what my life has been like the last month and a half, really all year. It's been crazy, but I'm going to do my best to stay on topic. So what have I been up to lately? I have had the craziest year ever. 2024 has been wild. I did a podcast about the state of the video industry previously, not that many episodes ago, and everything I said in that episode holds true. However, I do want to say that this year has been absolutely amazing. And I've seen a lot of people post about it and have talked to other people in the video industry who have said to me that this has been a really tough year. And I kind of thought it would be a tough year because it's an election year. And usually during election years, things tend to be a little rocky. You know, people are a little concerned about what's going to happen with the market, so they hold on to their dollars a little bit, especially in the business world where they might want to be a little conscious about how they're spending their ad spend. So I kind of anticipated that this would be a tough year, and it has been for a lot of people. But for whatever reason, for me, I've been truly blessed because it has been the complete opposite. This has been probably the best year I've ever had. It's been absolutely amazing. Pretty much all of my typical type of work, a lot of commercial work, a lot of corporate work, live streamings, shooting events, stuff like that. It's been crazy, honestly. So it's been a really, really solid year. And one thing that I've done this year that and I've been wanting to do this for a while, but is get back into retainer clients. I had retainer clients in the past, but they were never like really big retainer clients. This year, I've picked up some new retainer clients, and I haven't had a retainer client in a couple years, but these new retainer clients are great, and one of them in particular is really solid. Like it's a project where I'm going to be shooting content bi-weekly, and I'm going to be managing social media for this company. Actually, it's two companies. I'm shooting bi-weekly for both companies and am going to be running both social media accounts. Or, well, really, it's a bunch of social media accounts because it's both companies' social media channels on all of the platforms that they're on. So it's a lot of work. And I don't normally do a whole lot of social media posting and management simply because I love the content creation side of the business. However, these two businesses are actually in my local area, and I just love the businesses and I love the people involved with the businesses, and I think that they're going to be kind of really just fun to manage, and it's right down the road, so I can run down the road bi-weekly, shoot video and photo content, and then drip that out every day. And I'm actually really excited to do it, and that's for one. And then I have another retainer client in Houston I just picked up, so it's been great from the retainer standpoint, because jobs like that, having that like residual income helps me keep my wife home. Right, because my wife is a stay-at-home mom. She has been since our son was born in 2021. And when my son was first born, like we didn't know if that was going to be possible, but we were just like, let's just try it, see what happens. So she quit her job and never went back to work after her son was born. But we made it work. And for the first couple of years, you're just working paycheck to paycheck. Business has been great. Like the last 2, 3, 4 years, we've made a lot of money. It's been awesome. But there's a lot of expenses, right? You're investing in equipment, you're investing in advertising, you're investing in all these different areas. And so as a result of that, your net is never as good as it looks like on paper when you're looking at your gross and you're like, wow, we made a lot of money. But in actuality, you're like, oh, we spent it too. But because of that, we weren't sure if my wife was going to be able to be a stay-at-home mom. But in 2021, just cold turkey, we're like, yeah, screw it, let's just stay home. And so after my son was born, she never went back to work. But having retainer clients helps you in that kind of a situation where I can know every single month what to expect from my wife, or what to expect from my bank account to replace my wife's income. And that's really honestly very beneficial. If you are someone who is living by yourself and maybe you're living in an apartment or you're sharing a rental home or something with other people and you don't have a ton of bills, then maybe you don't want to go the retainer route because maybe you don't want to do the same type of thing over and over again. But when you're in a position like me where you have a family to support, you have a stay-at-home wife, you have kids, I have multiple kids now, you start to think about those things, right? Because being able to count on a certain amount of money every single month goes a long way in helping you know what you can and cannot do, what your expectations are, and then anything you make on top of that is just icing on the cake. So we picked up some new retainer clients over the past couple months, and honestly, that has been a godsend. And I'm really thankful for that, and I hope to pick up a couple more, to be honest with you, and continue to grow in that way. I don't normally do a ton of retainer work. I have done it in the past, but to be honest, most of my projects are, I'll get a project that's pretty big in size, and I work to get all the pieces together to execute said project. And once it's done, we move on to the next one. That's just how my work has always been for the most part. But having retainer clients is really helpful, and getting back to the retainer client game with my wife being at home has been great. But that's been a big part of what I've been up to lately. On top of that, I've been doing a lot of collegiate work. You guys know, if you follow me at all, that I do work for several colleges. I've been doing a ton of work for my alma mater. Did a bunch of work for them the last couple of years. I've got 2 huge projects lined up with them right now. One is a complete rebrand of one department at the university. The other is just a series of 7 videos. So it's just like a ton of work. And this is on top of all the work I've already done for them. So it's been great. It's been really cool that my old college has become honestly one of my biggest clients. So that's been amazing. I've been doing a lot there, developing and coming up with the concepts and storyboards and things for the projects we have upcoming. I have a little note here of some of the things I've been working on. I've been doing a lot in the AEC. You guys know, again, if you've been following me, that I do a lot of work in the AEC industry. It's architectural engineering and construction. That has continued to be amazing this year. From the construction standpoint, I've been all over the U.S. shooting projects for one of my clients. I've been going all over for another one of my clients, one of my biggest clients, a geospatial engineering firm. Been doing tons of work for them, like I usually do. But I kind of thought things might slow down this year, but so far it hasn't. If anything, it's kind of picked up. It's been pretty amazing. So the AEC industry continues to be really great for me. I've been doing a lot of work for some of my previous clients that do repeat shoots every year. Like tomorrow, I'm going to shoot for the sorority. You guys know, again, if you follow me, that I've done a lot of work for this sorority at Texas State. Every year we do a recruitment video for them. Me and my friend and fellow shooter Amanda Campbell do. That shoots tomorrow. So we got that coming up. That's usually one of my favorite projects every year because it's always a really fun, creative project with a lot of camera movement, a lot of transitions. They're just really fun projects, and we're excited to be doing another one tomorrow. Cowboy Trailer Sales. I do work for them every year. We just wrapped up our commercial for them. That was a fun commercial. If you haven't seen that, go to the Filming with Josh group on Facebook and scroll back a bit, and you'll find that video. That was a fun video. It was a scripted, storyboarded video about a boy who transitions into a man. And he's got a young horse that he's riding or going out to ride, and he's got a little ranch and rig trailer, which is like a horse trailer made for kids to be pulled behind kids' vehicles. My client, Cowboy Trailer Sales, owns ranch and rigs, so we were able to incorporate ranch and rigs in that project, showing the little boy with his little truck and trailer and his young horse, and then showing that boy as an adult, now a man, backing that horse grown up out of a horse trailer to go compete in a national cutting show. So that was fun. That was a cool scripted project. Just did a shoot for their sister company, Rattlesnake Ranch Pecans, last week. That was a fun scripted shoot. So I've been doing lots and lots of stuff like that. I'm trying to look on here. Yeah, honestly, and then been doing tons and tons and tons of work in the fishing industry, which has been great, particularly fly fishing industry. And I want to transition now from like a lot of what I've been doing work-wise into kind of what I've been doing fishing-wise, which sounds really funny. But as much work as I've done, I have actually been backing off the amount of work I personally am doing. And what I mean by that is I've been bringing in a lot of contractors. There's been shoots I haven't even gone to recently. I just am sending contractors to do it for me. People that I've been working with for a while that I know and trust. And I'll kind of set them up with the details on the projects and send them off to do their thing. I've been contracting out photo editing. I've been contracting out pretty much all my video editing. I have great relationships with my video editor, with people who edit photos for me, photographers, video shooters. I have a lot of contractors I've worked with over the years, and I've been working with them so much that I'm to a point now where I trust them to do the job without me always having to be there. And so recently I've been backing off, taking in all these new projects, but been sending people out to execute them for me, which has freed up some of my time, which you would think would mean I would be doing more podcasts, but instead I've been doing more fishing stuff, like personally fishing. I've been out on the water lately a lot, been getting into tenkara fishing. I like to fly fish. I love to fly fish. You've heard me talk about that on the podcast before, but I've been getting into tenkara fishing, which is a Japanese style fly fishing that has been around. I think it's like, as far as we know, it's been around for at least 500 years, but possibly before that. Hard to say. It's been around. Tenkara fishing has been around a long time. It was originally designed as basically a method of fly fishing without a reel. It was designed for mountain streams. In Japan, the rods are very long, 12, 13, 14 plus feet. Some can be shorter depending on the situation. But I fly fish a lot, but I've been getting into tenkara. So I've been going out doing a lot of tenkara fishing. And all this time on the water, what it's done for me is this. I am a board member. I got elected to the board of GRTU, which is the Guadalupe River Trout Unlimited chapter. It's Texas's only chapter of Trout Unlimited, and it also happens to be the largest chapter of Trout Unlimited in the world. I got elected to the board back in November. I already had been doing some like volunteer work and AV work for the organization, but recently got elected to the board. And as a board member, I've been donating a lot of time because we are the only chapter in the United States. It's 100% volunteer based, but I've been donating a ton of my time to the board, and I've been doing a lot of video stuff like my editor and I next week, for example, we're going to go out and shoot a series of videos on like educational-based videos on like how to read the trout waters here in New Braunfels on the Guadalupe River, how to properly handle fish, how to tie up double nymph rigs. Like we're going to go shoot a series of videos with our friend Chris Johnson, who owns Living Waters Fly Shop. And we're going to take those and create educational videos that we're going to put on YouTube. And we've been doing fly tying videos, all kinds of stuff. And what that's done is it's allowed me to go out, help out the organization, do stuff that I enjoy. I get to fish while I'm out. And it's pro bono work, but the benefit is it's helping me land a bunch of clients in the fly fishing industry. And so I've been doing a ton of work lately in the fly fishing industry, which is spectacular. In fact, one of the retainer clients I was just talking about is in the fly fishing industry. How cool is that? So I get to go shoot content bi-weekly in the fly fishing world and then post about it every single day. And getting those kind of jobs has come from my volunteer work with GRTU. So I've been spending a lot of time not actually video working. I've been going and shooting projects, but I've been sending other people to shoot projects, and I've been farming out most of my editing, which has freed up time for me to help out the board and do stuff for GRTU, which has led to work in an industry that I really love and appreciate. So it's been pretty awesome. So I've actually been spending more time on the water than I have in a long time, certainly since the kids were born, and it's making me more money, which is fantastic. I mean, that's like the dream, right? So it's been a really great year from that perspective. Other things, I was going to talk a little bit about camera firmware updates. I know I'm totally 180ing here, but I'm trying my best to stay. I have a little note sheet here. I'm trying to stay on topic so this doesn't become like a 2-hour podcast. I have so much to say. It probably could be. But anyway, I want to talk about camera firmware updates. There's been a couple of great firmware updates that have come out that have been really beneficial to me in particular. One set of firmware updates was for the Sony A1. And admittedly, Sony had a little bit of a hiccup with the firmware update. They had to pull it down and then re-release it. But I love the firmware update. It did several things for the A1 for me and fixed a couple of things that I wanted to be fixed in the A1. One is they gave it more dedicated video menus, kind of like the FX3 had. The FX3, at least after firmware update like 2.0 or something like that, got these really cool dedicated video menus and video layout on the screen. And the A1 now has that. So the video, some of the video menus and like literally if you're recording, the way that the frame rates and shutter speed and ISO and white balance and autofocus settings or manual focus settings or whatever, the way it's all lined out now is on the top and the bottom of the screen. Where the screen's like 16:9, it's right below and right above the actual field of view of what you're recording, which is great because now you're having less clutter on screen. So it's a small thing, but very much appreciated. The A1 also got things like focus breathing compensation, and most importantly to me, time code. Previously, to get time code into the A1, I had to use a Tentacle Sync Track E with an audio cable, and then I would have to, in Resolve, create the time code from the audio recording. And it's worked fine. It's not been a big deal to do it that way, but the downside of doing it that way is, one, it's an extra step in post, not a big step, but an extra step in post. Two, it meant that I had to eat up my audio jack with the time code cable. So if I wanted to have an audio, like maybe a shotgun mic for Nat sound in my A1, I either couldn't do it because I was recording time code into the audio slot, or I'd have to run a splitter and I have to have my shotgun audio on like the left track and then the time code audio on the right track. And then in post, I'd have to split the two tracks and create mono channels and blah, 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 blah. Well, now you don't have to do that anymore because you can run time code just like on the FX3, which means you can run time code via the multi-interface shoe. And Tentacle Sync makes a really great tiny little cable that goes straight from their Track E's. Not the Track E's, Tentacle Sync E's, the Track E. Well, technically the Track E too, but it goes straight from the Tentacle Sync E's into the multi-interface shoe on the A1 now, just like on the FX3, so you can have actual time code separate from the audio jack, and it's a driven set of numbers just like on the FX3, just like on the FX9, FX6, any other camera that has time code. So one, you can actually see the string of numbers and visually check to make sure that it looks the same as your other cameras for syncing purposes. Just that visual reference is nice. And then two, you're not eating up the audio jack anymore, so you can run a shotgun mic for scratch sound or something and not have to split it or anything in post. And then three, you don't have any extra work to do in post. It's already done. So that has been a major update for me personally. Focus breathing compensation is great. A lot of those other little features that I actually got quite a few features that were really helpful, but the biggest one to me is time code. And having that in the A1 definitely helps make this a more proper camera for the type of work I do. In fact, I'm using an A1 to film this right now, which really any camera could film this. Is super easy. I don't even have lights in here. All my gear, I mean, if you look at the shelves behind me, it's empty because all my gear is outside ready to go on a shoot tomorrow. So I'm having to record this on one of my extra A1 cameras that I'm not using tomorrow. But point is that having time code and some of these other video updates have been really nice. So that's a firmware update. I was really happy that came out. But the bigger firmware update to me was actually the FX6. So I knew the FX6 was going to get a firmware update. Sony announced it a while back. And it got some updates that are useful that I knew were coming, like anamorphic desqueeze, a little bit more anamorphic desqueeze options and things like that, among other things. But honestly, the biggest thing, and I know this is flown under the radar for some reason, but this to me is huge. It's the biggest firmware update, in my opinion, the FX6 has gotten in a while, and it's because of this one feature. It fixed one of my only problems with the FX6. I love the FX6. I use it constantly, have for the last 3 or 4 years. But the one thing that drove me crazy on the FX6 is I don't use the stock monitor. I have it removed, and I have connected via SDI a small HD Cine 5 monitor. And I run the whole camera off the small HD monitor, and that small HD monitor is connected via SDI, and the power is connected from a DTAP to LEMU cable. And so, or LEMU, whatever it is. Anyway, so my FX6 battery, I run aftermarket batteries that have like DTAP slots. So my FX6 batteries power my monitor and the camera at the same time. So everything's all inclusive. If you want to learn more about that, go to either my YouTube channel or go to the Facebook group and search my FX6 build, and you'll see a layout of how I operate my camera. But I don't use the stock monitor. I just use the small HD Cine 5. But the problem with that has been the FX6 has great autofocus capabilities and has some capabilities that cameras like the A1 don't have, like the ability to have eye or face autofocus only, meaning if there's not a face or an eye detected, it won't autofocus at all. Things like that are very useful. And the FX6 has that. And just the way it changes focus, the way it just operates is so smooth on the FX6. It's really, really, really good. But when you're not using the stock monitor, you do not have access to tracking. Because on the FX6, the only way to track something, at least up until its firmware update, was to tap the screen on the object you wanted to track. Well, I don't use the stock monitor, so if I tap the monitor, nothing would happen because I'm tapping my small HD monitor. I'm pulling up some options, like it has nothing to do with the camera. So without the stock monitor, you couldn't really track anything. And I've always said many times that the one thing that would make the FX6 over the top for me would be a way to select objects to track via the joystick. And somehow Sony heard that message, and probably not for me, but they heard that message and they put it into the FX6 with the latest firmware update. It's awesome. So what it does is you can select faces or objects using the joystick, and what it does, there's a little tiny target, and you move the target to whatever it is you want the target to be on, and you press enter on the joystick, and it tracks that object, just like you were doing touchscreen tracking. So for those of you who are like me, who run an external monitor, you can now track objects without having to have the stock monitor anymore. And for those of you who use an external viewfinder or an external eye loop, like a viewfinder, if you're using an eye loop, you had the same problem because the eye loop, if you have it connected to the stock monitor, you can't obviously have the monitor up to your eye and tap the screen. Well, now you can use the joystick. So for anybody who operates the camera either without the stock monitor or with a viewfinder, you now have the ability to still track objects using the joystick. Huge. That's a huge update. Now, Sony just pulled the FX6 firmware update at the time of recording this video because they found a small problem. They said they're going to address it and get it back out there. I've already updated my camera. I don't seem to have the problem that they had. It's working fine for me. But if you didn't update your FX6 yet, just know the firmware update is about to be released soon as they address that issue. So it's coming. But if you haven't updated, be on the lookout for that update because that has been a very useful update. I went ahead and used it last week at my Rattlesnake Ranch pecan shoot. It was awesome. I selected objects and people with the joystick, and you kind of could select people in the past, but that was it. You didn't have like a joystick control over a cursor or anything like that. But now you do. So it's a tremendous way to work. I highly recommend updating your FX6 when the firmware update comes back out and using the joystick tracking feature. It is totally worth it. Speaking of cameras, I have something here that I was going to show off, and this is the first camera I've purchased in like the last 3 years. Like, in all seriousness, I haven't bought a camera in a long time. Well, that's a lie. I bought a camera last year, the Fujifilm X100V, and I did a whole podcast on it, talking about some things I liked about the camera and some things I didn't like. And after the podcast came out, a couple weeks later, I actually returned the camera. I just couldn't get over the fact that it was Super 35 because it had if you don't know what the Fujifilm X100V is or X106 or anything like that, it's this pocket camera with a built-in lens, and it's a built-in prime lens, and the camera's really tiny. So it's great for just throwing in a backpack or in your pocket or a fishing bag or whatever and taking it with you for family photos, BTS content. That's what I use it for. Family photos, BTS content, fishing content, social media posts, that kind of thing. But as great as it was in size, the problem was it's a Super 35 sensor and the lens was an f2, which is pretty fast in general, but it's a wider lens. It's a 35 mil equivalent lens. And 35 mil f2 on a 35 millimeter sensor is kind of harder to get the shallow depth of field look that I really like. All of my cameras are full frame, my A1s, my FX6, my FX3. I've been a full frame shooter for many years. There's nothing wrong with Super 35. I just like the full frame look. Fujifilm didn't have it. Plus, I felt like the lens was kind of soft. It couldn't focus very close. There were just some things that kind of bothered me. And the photos just looked so different than my other Sony photos that when I would shoot pictures like BTS content, I oftentimes didn't like the way it mixed on my profile or my feed versus my other normal Sony shots from the A1. Which is not a fair comparison, right? The A1s cost $6,500. The Fujifilm camera cost like $1,200 or $1,500 or whatever it was. But I couldn't get over that. Well, I talked about in my podcast that came out last year, the X100V podcast, about how I really wanted this particular camera, but there were a few things that kept me from buying it. But I went ahead and bought it anyway. And this is the Sony RX1R. And I got it used on eBay. It had a very low shutter count. And honestly, the camera looks brand new. And this camera just is amazing. It just makes me smile. This is as far as I know, this is the smallest full frame photo camera in the world, as far as I know. If you look at it, look how tiny this thing is. This is the itty bitty. My A1 would have like a nice thick grip, which is great if you're shooting professionally all day. But, it's a much bigger, thicker camera, much bigger body. And then you put on a 35 mil lens, the lens is going to stick out like this. It's a big, cumbersome thing. Not like for work. If I'm working, I don't think it's that big and heavy. But for a camera that I'm going to throw in my fishing bag, or that I'm going to keep on set for behind the scenes pictures for filming with Josh, or that I'm going to take on family vacation, it was just bigger than what I wanted to carry around. This thing is itty bitty. It is a tiny little full frame camera, and it has a Zeiss 35 f2 prime lens. And this lens, I had read online, and I've looked at pictures on this camera for years, and the pictures are tremendous. Like, the pictures are very much similar to what my normal Sony cameras shoot, except for this Zeiss lens is really special. This is a very special Zeiss lens. It just has this secret sauce to it. It looks amazing. And it's an f2 lens, which I said f2 on Super 35 isn't the shallowest, but on a 35 mil equivalent lens. But f2 on a 35 mil equivalent lens on a full frame camera is pretty shallow. In fact, if you want to see a couple pictures from this camera, go to my personal Facebook page or my Instagram, and you'll see some pictures I posted, I guess it was yesterday. Yeah, yesterday, of this giant Rio Grande cichlid I caught on Tenkara, again with the fishing thing. But I had this in my bag because it takes up no space, and I was fishing with my editor, and I had him take a couple pictures of me and the fish, and you'll see like how beautiful these images are. This is the prettiest camera ever. The photos are tremendous, and I kind of customized mine. I got this little fly, this little so the cool thing about these older leaf shutter style cameras is that they have little screw holes so you can actually add shutter release buttons. So I purchased one that's got a little fly on it, And then I've even purchased a little hot shoe cover that's got like I don't know if you can see that here, but a person fly fishing. So I found these online and bought them. They're really cool. They were custom made out of some kind of wood. They're really pretty though. And I got this strap for my birthday last year. My wife bought it for me. So I have it all together. It's a cool looking camera, but you can see how tiny it is. And it's got the A7R2, A7R3 sensor in it. This camera's old. This camera came out in like 2015 or 2016 or something like that. So it's been around. I mean, it's been around a while, like 9 years. That's part of why I didn't buy one and why I bought the Fujifilm, because this camera, even though it's like 8 or 9 years old, still retails for $3,200, which I thought was insane. This is like the only camera I've ever seen Sony make that has never had a price drop in terms of photo cameras. It's never had a price drop in 8 or 9 years. I thought that was stupid. It's like, I'm not going to buy an 8 or 9 year old camera for $3,200 when I can buy this relatively new Fujifilm, but it just has the look. But because it's an 8 or 9 year old camera, it's got the A7R2, A7R3, 42 megapixel full frame sensor. I'm very used to that sensor. A lot of my imagery that I've shot over the years was on those cameras because I had an R2 and then I got an R3. My wife had an R2. She now has an R3. Of course, I shoot on the A1s now, but I shot for years on the R2, R3 sensor. So I'm very used to the sensor. I know exactly what the files are going to be, and they're exactly like they were. And they're very similar to my A1. My A1's a better camera by far, and it should be. It's way more expensive, and it shoots world-class pictures. But this is a great camera, and the pictures off of this cut really well with my A1 photos and cut really well with what I shot in the R2 and R3 years ago. So I'm very happy with this sensor. But again, the secret sauce is the lens. It's a beautiful lens. Look how tiny it is. This 35 f2 Zeiss lens is itty bitty. So I can take this out, and it's got a little macro mode too, so you can get real close. If you're taking pictures of someone holding like a fly or something, you can get nice and close, which is really cool. You just pop it over from infinity to macro mode. So infinity, macro, pretty cool. And the lens cap is metal, which is sick. But it's just a sweet camera, and it's different. It's a different experience than my A1. It doesn't have a joystick, which is kind of annoying. The battery is not good, but I'm not shooting like all day with this. I mean, it's the battery. But I'm not shooting all day with this camera. I'm using it primarily for BTS content, pictures of when I'm on my fishing trips, social media content. This new company that are these new businesses I told you that I'm doing social media management for, I already took this into one of the stores the other day during a meeting, and before I left, I snapped a couple pictures and threw it on their social forum, and they look great. So it's a camera you can carry everywhere. It literally fits in a pocket in my briefcase. It fits in my chest pack on my fishing gear. It fits in my fly fishing, my fly fishing sling pack or bat pack, and takes up like no space. And I can throw it in a jacket pocket. I can toss it in the truck, take it with me everywhere I go. And it serves the role of being a EDC camera, everyday carry camera, but while maintaining the full frame look and having the beautiful image quality that Zeiss is known for. This is a tremendous camera, and I absolutely love it. It has some shortcomings, still runs on an older SD card slot, not even UHS 2, small battery life, no joystick, older generation autofocus, but the images are world class. And what's cool is, I mean, it's got the tilt screen, but it's got this little pop-up, I'm doing it upside down here, it's got this little pop-up viewfinder, which is neat. It looks good. And when you're done, you pop it down. So it just takes up no space. I mean, look at that. And that's just fun. Just pop it up, pop it down. But I said in my podcast last year that I just couldn't swallow the idea of purchasing this camera for the amount of money it was, considering how old it was. But I went ahead and did it because I really needed an everyday carry camera, and I didn't want to carry my A1s every day. They're too big for an EDC camera. But I didn't like the Fujis, and even the Leicas are much bigger than this. And the Leicas, I don't think the image quality are as good. The little Leica, like the Q2, Q3s, they're great cameras, but they're bigger. And I personally don't think the image quality is as good. And the autofocus on the Leica system, honestly, it probably isn't even as good as this older camera. I mean, it was so far ahead of its time that I don't even think the Leicas today can compete. So I just went ahead and I was like, screw it, I'm just going to buy it. And I'm so glad I did. This has been a pure joy to use. I had it in my bag yesterday, like I said, caught that nice fish, editor popped some photos, it turned out great, got some good social content. So I'm not trying to encourage you to go buy this, but I will tell you, it's tremendous. So I think that might have been everything I was going to talk about. But yeah, this has been It's been a good year, and that's why I haven't been on the podcast. I promise to be back on it more regular now. Things have kind of settled down. Another part of it was I had a lot of tax stuff going on, but I'm actually hiring a company to run all my books moving forward, so I don't have to deal with that anymore. But again, that goes back to I've been contracting everything from my bookkeeping to photography, photo editing, video editing, even some of my video shooting. Still doing a lot of shooting myself, obviously. But I've been contracting a lot, been taking a step back, working more on growing my network in industries that I know and love, and it's given me the opportunity to go fishing and to do some really cool stuff and to get in with clients that I really like and get back on the retainer route. It's been a good year, guys. It's been a really good year. How has your year been? Go to Filming with Josh on Facebook and let me know, or if you're watching this on YouTube, comment there. And be sure to like or at least subscribe to the podcast and rate it if you can. It just helps get the numbers up so more people like you can find the podcast. Thanks for listening, and I promise to be back next week.
To learn more about Rustic River Media, visit us online at rusticriver.media. Thanks for listening to the Filming with Josh podcast. Catch every episode by hitting subscribe today.